Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast, where we explore personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm really excited for my guest today. But before we get into it, I have a couple quick announcements to make. First, just head to the link in the show notes. You'll find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by Marcy Shimoff, Michael Beckwith, and Bob Doyle, all of whom were from the film The Secret. It was also endorsed by John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and a lot of great others. Also, in the show note links, you will find links to my free live masterclass that I give every couple weeks, some free downloads, as well as my courses, ways to work with me through coaching. And of course, you'll find all of my amazing guest links as well. And as always, this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune podcast network. And speaking of which, I have a fellow podcaster from that network with me. So I'm really excited for today's interview. Today, I have with me Sandee Sgarlata. And Sandee is a two-time award-winning author, certified life coach since 2004, professional speaker, retired U.S. national and international figure skating coach, gold medalist in ice skating, Reiki Master Teacher, and she spent the last 20 years helping people create lasting change in their lives. She is the host of the Happiness Solved podcast. She is the managing director for the Los Angeles Tribune Global Podcast Network. And her recent best-selling book, Happiness Solved: Climbing 100 Steps, is a self-improvement book, heart memoir, and workbook. So welcome, Sandee. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I was just on your show. We had an amazing conversation. Just really quick plug, go check out Sandee's podcast. It's amazing. It's called Happiness Solved.
Thank you.
So I always like to start my conversations the same way, and that is by asking my guests, what is their origin story? So what is it that made you want to write a book about happiness and start a podcast about happiness?
Well, it was interesting because I didn't take the normal route that many people do. You go to high school, go to college, whatnot. Instead, I always wanted to be in the ice capades. And so after high school graduation, I got a letter in the mail from the ice capades, and it was said, congratulations, you're on a waiting list. And so I was like, well, maybe I should go to college. I tried it. It didn't work out. So fast forward 30 plus years, I ended up finishing my bachelor's degree in 2019, which was 35 years after finishing high school. But during that time, I had to work on a project. It was like my final project. And this was in 2019. And I started working on a company, it was a business management degree. And I started working on a company. And what turned out was I started actually writing my book, and I didn't even realize it. But as I sat there writing, and I don't know, because I know you've written a book as well, and people who are writers, sometimes you just get downloads and you just start writing, and you go back and you read it and you're like, what did I just say? Well, I started talking about how I was so disgusted with humanity and the way the world was evolving, and that humanity was at a crossroads, and that something has got to change. And if not, the anger and the decisiveness was going to spread like a disease. Well, I wrote that in 2019 and finished the book in January of 2020. Of course, had no idea what was coming in that COVID hit us. And I was like, wow, like I actually, kind of foresaw that, in my book. And it's really just a matter of, I've been through so much in my life, and I've learned so much. And it's actually pretty simple. It's just not easy. Right. And so I wanted to have kind of a guidebook where people could just pick it up and say, this is all you need to do. Just follow these steps, and you'll be able to restore your mind and your heart into a place of peace and love. It was recommended that I launch a podcast at the same time. And I did, because I used to have a blog talk radio show from 2008 to 2010 called Everything Mind, Body, Spirit. It's still out there. I've listened to the episodes. I'm like, oh my God, that was so bad. But I had a blast doing it. And I love talking to people that know more about a subject than I do, right? Because that's how we learn. And so the platform, my podcast, is really just the same thing. It's free. Tune in. and get a dose of happiness. I have over 300 episodes that have been released as of today's recording, as we're recording this. And every single episode, you're going to get golden nuggets of learn so many different tools, because that's what it's about. It's about building that toolbox so that you can, have resilience when life happens. You know what to do so that it doesn't disrupt your peace and happiness for that long. It's going to disrupt it. Let's be honest, right? Happiness is a journey, not a destination. And as long as people can really embrace that, it's not like, I'll be happy when I get this, or I'll be happy when I do this. You can find happiness in every situation. And there's always a silver lining, no matter what.
I love that last part. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that journey. I learned so much about you. But I love that last part that you said, just because we've found healing or we found happiness or we found enlightenment doesn't mean life's going to stop happening, right? Like life keeps happening. There's going to be challenges, there's going to be adversities, but it's about having those tools in your toolbox so that when you're going through that winter season of your life, you can not only survive it, but thrive during it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, even right now, I started working with a new coach. And I always like to just throw this in. If you're looking for a coach, make sure your coach has a coach, because
Yes.
right, you always have to have a coach, especially if you plan on charging people for your time. Make sure you're working with somebody that has a coach. And the past 2 sessions, I've actually, for the first time in my life, I've gotten irritated with her because she's pushing me so hard. And it's hard being uncomfortable. But in order to grow, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm getting upset because I'm like, when am I going to be done? I'm so tired of peeling away these layers. And that's how we grow. And the past few weeks of my life have been really difficult, like nothing earth shattering, just all in my head, just sorting through stuff, right? Because we all have childhood trauma. And as you keep peeling the layers away, you're going to uncover more stuff. And now that I feel like I'm on the other side of it, it's like, wow, like this is really awesome. Because whenever you're feeling that uncomfortableness, just know that you're almost, you're at the end of the lights. You can see the light at the end of your tunnel. Like you're getting close. You're about to have a breakthrough.
Yeah. I love that you're like, when am I done? Because that's so relatable. But it's like, if you're here living on earth incarnated right now, you're not done. Right?
You're not done.
Like, there's more lessons, there's more growth, there's more to peel back and uncover. Okay, so I have to ask, what were these things that you were disgusted with about humanity? And has any of that resolved since you wrote your book, or is it getting worse?
That's a really, really great question. And because I've chosen to live under a rock and do not watch the news, hardly ever, I'll get highlights. It's kind of gotten better. I think there's a percentage of society that COVID kind of shook people up. However, there's still, especially in the United States, we've got the middle America that unfortunately, it's a travesty that our education system has not been better in this country, and that there's a lot of very uneducated people in the United States that have blinders on, and they choose to hear what they're hearing instead of, as most educated people would do, and do their own research and find out what's really going on, instead of just believing it's like he said, she said. Like there's still a lot of that decisiveness going on. And I think the media is a big part to blame for that, because you're only hearing what they choose, the narrative that they want you to hear. So I think that, while I think it has shook up a lot of people going through COVID, I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And, it's hard to say whether or not it's going to get any better, because at the end of the day, they for years, we always say, think locally, not globally, right? Because you can only change so much in your surroundings, right?
Right.
And it's still that way. But at the end of the day, everything is an inside job, no matter what it is you're working on. So if people start to look within and recognize that all the answers are within themselves, then maybe we still have a chance at turning things around.
Yeah. I
I
remember when the
just don't think that,
pandemic, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just think that most people don't want to do it. It's being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable really sucks.
Yeah.
And it's easier. It's so much easier to just ignore it.
Yeah. And it's scary for people to get out of their comfort zone as well. Like I was gonna say, I remember when COVID was happening, I was thinking there has to be good coming out of this, right? Like this is what's gonna help humanity rise in consciousness and help with the awakening. And I don't know that it really did, but you touched on something that's so important to highlight is our perception is our reality, right?
Yes.
And quantum physics backs this up. We're living in a time when science backs this up. And you were saying like some people don't do the research. The other flip side of that is you can do research on anything and find quote unquote proof out there that backs up your beliefs, right? In this day and age with social media and like you said, with the media, it's anything you believe and your beliefs create your reality. There is something out there that backs it up in this day and age. And, two people can be living next door to each other and seem to live in different realities. And they're so gung-ho on their belief system. It's just a crazy time.
Very, very much so.
This actually brings us to what we were talking about on your show, and I'd love to hear more of your perspective on it. We were talking about how people get so easily offended these days, right? And they take things so personally and they blame outside events and other people for their suffering. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that affects happiness and how happiness ties into all that.
Oh, it's everything. It's everything, because when you're making a choice, because you have to remember happiness is a choice. And when it comes to perspective, so you can think about it. Let's see, what can I relate it to? Because there's so many different scenarios. Let me think. I don't know. Can you think of just a basic scenario? My mind is.
Well, you were telling me that someone told you they didn't want their episode aired because you mispronounced their name, right? That's like
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a perfect example. I completely blocked right there. Yes. And now I kind of have fun with that whole thing, because you never know how. I played tennis last night with somebody named Jorge, but the way he spells it, I'm like, is it George or is it Jorge? And I just got, and yeah. And so, yes, I had this guest. We had a great conversation. He's a PhD psychiatrist or psychologist. And I said his name wrong and apologized. And he was so offended by it that he asked me not to. He emailed me twice and reached out to me on LinkedIn saying, please do not air this episode. And I was like, in that moment, you have a choice. We all have a choice. He blamed it on his branding. And I'm like, you can either choose to be offended that somebody mispronounced your name. And let's look at that. What's really at the bottom of that? So we're going to break this down, because we've got consciousness and ego. Mm-hmm. So you can easily say, yeah, that was his ego, right? It was clearly his ego. But let's break it down. He's worried about his brand. So what really is that? He's fearful. He's afraid that the me mispronouncing his name is going to affect his brand. People don't give a crap.
They really don't.
They really don't. And I had a choice too when I saw that, because of course I was then offended, right? It offended me that he didn't. And I was like, and I thought about it, and this is just a tool for people, sometimes before you hit send, whether it's a text message or an email, I will say what I want to say. I will get it all out, but I just don't send it. And then I delete it. And all I said was, I said something to the effect of, right now I have a choice as to how I'm going to respond, and I choose consciousness. And that's all I said. And, because the thing is, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter that I've mispronounced his name, and sometimes I'll say to people, you know what, you're in America now. If you're a US citizen, just deal with it. Everybody spells their name. I mean, I've been Sandee Sgarlata for 35 years, and 9 out of 10 people say my last name wrong. How miserable, to bring this back to happiness, do you know how miserable I would be if every day somebody mispronounced my name and I got upset about it? My gosh, life's too short. No. So it does affect it because you're choosing negative emotions. And whenever you're choosing negativity over the positive, it all goes back to the map of consciousness, our frequency that we're emitting. And when you're choosing any type of negativity, you cannot be happy. You can't be grateful and angry at the same time. They cannot coexist. You cannot feel love and fear at the same time. They do not coexist. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
That is the world that we live in.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I mean, honestly, he could have in the moment made the choice to say, "Oh, hey, actually, you pronounced my name wrong. It's pronounced this." Or not even blamed you, like, "Oh, hey, it's actually pronounced this way." And it's just a blip, right? But he had the choice to probably sit there the rest of that episode and like ruminating in that. I like your thing where you type it all out and then delete it. You know what I've started doing is I'll type it all out and then I go to Chat GPT and I say, "Can you rephrase this in a really nice way?" And it's amazing. It's like my go-to now.
I love that. I love that. But it's important because the happiest people are those that feel the full range of emotions. And you have to feel it. Yeah, because what I wanted to say was, well, it's your loss, not mine, because I've got this big podcast and I get all these downloads and blah, blah. No, that's my ego talking, right?
Right.
But that's how you feel. And it's okay. It's okay to feel that way, right? But it's a choice in that moment. But going through that motion of me just typing it all out was a way to just get it off of my chest. And then you make the right choice. Then you do the next right thing. How can I stay in consciousness, stay in love, and see this? Because love is a teacher, right? I've been reading this book by Gabby Bernstein, and it's amazing. And she says in there, there's like a mantra she says, which is, "Thank you, universe, for guiding me to perceive this fear through the teacher of love."
I love that.
And I'm like, yeah, because love is the teacher. And everything that we're fearful beings. It's in our DNA. We will 1,000% of the time, we will always default to fear before any other emotion. Fear is always going to pop in. And it has served us well over the years, and it still serves us. It's just being able to distinguish between when you're in a fearful state and where you're, and being able to dissect that and be like, okay, I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? Is it true? And have that awareness and self-awareness to distinguish between those thoughts, because it is just a perception. Like you started out this conversation. It's all a perception.
Yeah, and I really like that idea of asking yourself, is this true? And even if it is true, what can be done about it, right? We don't have to just succumb to this fear. Okay, I love everything you said. It's so beautiful, especially about love being the teacher. So how do we navigate life in this day and age when it feels like everyone and their mother is out there getting offended, where it's almost become trendy to be a victim? Like, how do we navigate that? How do we stay in love, and how do we find happiness within that to bring it back to happiness?
It's a choice. It literally is a choice, and seeing it for what it is. And when you have a situation where somebody is offended, number one, and it depends on how you're reacting to it. So they're offended and you have a choice. You can either choose to agree with them, right? Because that's what they want, right? When people are playing the victim, they want people to agree with them, right? Or you can show up as a teacher. and maybe be like, I've learned to ask permission from people. Say, is it okay if I offer you a different perspective? Because if you just offer it, they're not ready to hear it. And sometimes they'll be like, you know what? I need to sit with this for a little bit. And then you need to respect that and let them, and just say, and if they say, yeah, can you help me with this? Because many times when you've been violated or hurt, or you feel like a victim, because it happens all the time. And it's our natural default where something happens to you, and I'm using air quotes right now, and you feel like that. And yeah, it did happen to you. And it's in that moment you have a choice. Can I see the lesson in this? Why is this happening to me? Because at some point you will reach, if you focus on this and you really pay attention, you will reach a point where you will say, this happened for me. And you're able to shift that perspective. But, I've just learned, because like, especially with my girlfriends, they all know that I'm a coach, and they don't want to be coached. Like, a lot of times people don't want to be coached. Yeah. Right. And so asking their permission is just a good way to go about it. But at the end of the day, you're in charge. I'm in charge. We're all in charge of our own happiness, and it's your choice. And so you can either choose to go with the flow and be like everybody else and be miserable, and wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, I spent the last month being upset over this issue. Like, why? Is it worth it? Because life is short. And it's going by faster and faster. And so every single day, bring it back to a choice. We have a choice.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I love the idea of asking permission, because then it puts it back in their court, right? Like, they have the opportunity to grow and step into their own power, or they can retreat into victimhood, right? And then that's not on you anymore, right?
That's right.
I mean, it was never on you, but they were perceiving it to be on you. It reminds me, I know you're a student of ACIM, and I love ACM as well. There's that one part in there, there's no victims, only volunteers, right? And I always think about that. Okay, so you've written this book on happiness. You've got this podcast. You've talked to so many people. What have you learned about happiness, and how have you implemented it into your own life?
Well, I guess it goes back to the choice. Happiness is a choice. And what I've also learned is that, to bring it back to when we first started, life is going to happen. And we can't stop it. It's going to happen. And, even though, like I said, I choose to live under a rock, meaning I'm just not, I just don't watch the news. I think it's very healthy to take breaks from that, because it's so much out of your control, and you can really drive yourself crazy. But we're all in this together, number one. Okay. There is a collective consciousness. We're all in this together. Nobody is excluded from pain and suffering. We're all going to experience it. And it's really just about continuing to build and grow your toolbox, and know that everything happens for a reason. This too shall pass. It's not permanent. Maybe today I'm not in a position to make a choice, and that's okay. There's day, and being gentle with yourself is really the last part of that, is that, if I need to spend a week ruminating over something and figuring something out in my mind, that's okay. I have to take care of myself, and being gentle with myself, and giving myself grace to sort through some of these feelings. I had hoped that it would get easier as I get older. And what's happening is because I've been on this path for 34 years, and you start getting deeper and deeper, there's stuff coming up from, when I was a toddler.
Wow.
There's, and it's just childhood trauma. We all have it. And as long as you're open and receptive to seeing things differently, and really diving into that, and learning how to navigate that, and learning how to recognize it for it, recognize the emotion for what it is. Because what happens is, and this was the big takeaway that I'll leave you with, that I've learned over the past few weeks, is I've given my power away to certain things. Okay. And when you recognize that you're giving your power away, you can then claim it back and not let it affect you the way it's been affecting me for the past 30 plus years of my life.
Wow. It sounds like you just came to that like big realization. That's a really powerful lesson that you just learned recently. That's amazing.
Yeah, it has
I'm
been
so
very
happy
recent.
for you to hear that. Like, it sounds like you've had a rough couple of weeks, and I'm sorry for that, but it sounds like something really beautiful came out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it was only rough in my own mind, right?
Yeah, that's true, right? That's how it goes.
I'm still going about my day. I'm still doing my thing and all of that. But it's in there, and it's a dialogue, and there's no time limit. There's nothing that says, and I've heard people say, oh, I give myself 5 minutes. Well, that's great if you can give yourself 5 minutes and you can be over it. But chances are, if you've been on this planet more than 30 or 40 years, you're going to need a little more than 5 minutes to work through some deep issues. And that's okay. Like, allow yourself whatever time you need, because nobody's timing you. There's no rush. I want to feel it. I want to make sure that I can get through that so more shit can come up, right?
Yeah, right.
Bring it on. Give me some more. What else is
more lessons? Yeah.
Right. Come on. I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've learned a similar lesson too, that like happiness will come in cycles too, right? Like, I know it's a choice. I totally agree with that, but feeling happy overall comes in cycles, right? Like, we all go through dark nights of the soul where things are really difficult. We're learning those lessons. And when you're in it, when you're in that shit, it's like, it feels like you're in it forever and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's just so heavy, but happiness always comes back around. And I don't know, like, personally, I went through a dark night of the soul in 2020. I told you a little bit about it after our show. And I've found this lightness again with my son, and just it's this amazing thing that I didn't know that I was going to get back to this level of high. And it's such I don't know, life's so interesting that way.
It really is. And it's seasons, like you mentioned a couple of times. We all have these different seasons of our life, and just, it is what it is. And I've chosen to go through in consciousness in the best way that I can.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just being awake and aware and, self-aware is such a big key, which brings me to the fact that I don't want you to have to give away your whole book. I won't ask you to do that. But you mentioned that happiness is really simple. Like, the idea of it is really simple. There's certain steps. So can you tell us like a couple of those steps at least? Because I'm really curious what your steps are.
Sure, absolutely. It comes down to, I have a formula, which it actually isn't even in the book, that I came up with this after, but it's self-awareness plus self-love plus spirituality gets you to your zone of genius. And if you really want to be happy, getting to that zone of genius, that's where it's at. And I wrote this book before I was even, quote, aware of that, if you will. I've been in my zone of genius many times in my life. I just didn't know how to get there more on a regular basis. And that's really, it requires that self-awareness where you're paying attention to your emotions, loving yourself enough to do the next right thing, which is generally forgiveness. And, self-love, taking care of yourself. What do I need to do to take care of this? And the spirituality is huge, having a power greater than yourself, meditation, all of those things combined will get you to a place where miracles unflow right before your eyes. Your day just like you're in that zone where time and space is gone, and you're just living life and just loving it, and it's like euphoria in a sense. So feel the feelings, practice forgiveness, and after you've gone through that, then it really comes down to gratitude.
Mm.
But I always say you can gratitude your way out of anything, and in a pinch, yes, if you're in a pinch and if you need to be on, just start focusing on gratitude, because it will help you to raise your vibrational frequency. However, you really want to feel the feelings, practice forgiveness, and then focus on gratitude. But it's really, it comes down to as basic as that.
I love that. And when you say the zone of genius, that's that flow state that you were just talking about, right? That place where you're just in euphoria. I love that word. Yeah, I love what you wrote. And I write, it's funny, I don't do it in that specific order, but I write about all those things, feeling your emotions and forgiveness and gratitude in my own book. And I like that you pointed out that it's so simple, but so many people have a hard time with it. And, I've had a hard time with it myself, and I'm sure you have too. So what do we say to those people who are really struggling with forgiveness? Because just aside, I know every time do a lot of content, and every time I do a video on forgiveness, there's always those people in the comments that are like, oh, well, so-and-so did this. Like, that's unforgivable. Like, what do you say to those people?
Well, it's a choice.
Yep.
So here's the thing. Somebody did something horrible to you. Okay. You have a choice. And you can sit and you can be angry with that person, and you can be resentful, and you'll spend however many days, months, years feeling resentful and bitter. And how is that affecting the other person? It's not affecting the other person in any way, shape, or form. They don't care. They could care less. So you're holding, forgiving another person does not condone what they did. It doesn't erase what they did, none of that stuff. All it is doing is you're reclaiming your power back. And I also invite people, if you feel like you've had something done to you and you feel like you can't get over it, there's so many different stories out there of, there's little girls in Africa that every day they have to go get water for their family. Okay. And every day when they go get water for their family, they are gang raped. Every single day. People, are you hearing that? Every single day, a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 7-year-old little girl who has to go get water for her family is gang raped on a daily basis. Okay. So put it in perspective and know that you're not letting that person off the hook, but what you're doing is you're saying, I am better than this, I am bigger than this, and I'm going to take my power back, and I'm going to choose forgiveness so that I can be free to be happy and live my life to the fullest. Because if you're going to sit in bitterness and anger and resentment, number one, you're going to become physically ill. Okay. Yep. Because those are such negative emotions. You will become physically ill. It may take 10 years, but I promise you, you are going to have some serious health issues if you hold on to that. And it's not worth it. Stop being so stubborn. People are being stubborn. Because you want to have, is it that, like for me, I'm like, is it that comfortable to be so angry with another person? Because it's got to be a miserable existence for people.
I think it's interesting that you say, is it that comfortable? Because I think sometimes people start to wrap their identity up in it, right? Just how people, when they're sick, a lot of times will wrap their identity up in their disease or their illness, right? They're like, I'm a cancer patient or I'm whatever. And I think that that's a lot of what victimhood does to people, right? Mm-hmm. It's this false sense of self, I guess. And it's a way for people to feel empowered, but it's not true empowerment, if that makes sense. Yeah.
If I may share a story, because, and I bring this up a lot because I think it's so freaking profound. I was interviewing a quadriplegic, and I want to have her back on my show because it was very early on when I launched my podcast. It was probably in one of the first 50 episodes that I did. And I'm talking to this woman who became a quadriplegic at a very young age, probably in her early, I think she was like late 20s, early 30s. And she is somebody who needs 24/7 care. She can't do anything on her own. Okay. But she is the most positive person that you could ever speak with. And I said to her, I was like, there's got to be days where you wake up and you're like, why me? Why me? She goes, oh, it happens all the time. Happens all the time. Right? What would my life had looked like had I not gone diving that day and broke my neck and I'm now a quadriplegic? And I go, well, what do you do? Like, how do you make that shift so that you're not sitting in that victimhood that can bring you down? And she goes, I talk to a paraplegic who has it worse off than I do.
Wow. That gave me like serious goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So it's perspective. It's all about perspective. That, yeah, it may really suck that happened to you. It sucks. It's horrible. I'm so sorry that you're in pain and that you've gone through that. However, I promise you there's somebody that has it worse off than you, that has found a way to every day fight and keep and not to give up and give in to that bitterness and anger and resentment. Because even though she's sitting in a chair and all she can do is move her face, she still finds peace and happiness in her life. Yeah, and she's married. She's married. She met her husband after she was a quadriplegic. She's married. She has a very fulfilling life.
Wow.
You know, it's like you talk to a blind person that was born blind. They're like, I don't know. I see fine. Right?
Yeah.
They don't know any different. They don't know any different. Right? But you lose your sight at the age of 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever. It's horrible. Or is it? Right?
Yeah. And like, I don't know if you believe this, but I'm a huge believer in soul contracts, right? Like there was something that
sure.
yeah, okay. You're on the level. It's like, there's something that we needed to learn, right? And we helped decide all of these things we're going to go through, these big life circumstances. And then there's free will, right? Like we have the choice what we do with those circumstances, right? Like we've been saying, like we can use it to go into anger and victimhood and unconsciousness and unhappiness and blame and suffering, or we can see it as a lesson and grow and learn and level up from it and become better instead of bitter. And
yeah. For sure. And you know, I had so much trauma and tragedy when I was a kid. And then I have my miracle baby, my little boy, who's now 23 years old, getting ready to graduate from college. And when he was 13, his father, we were already divorced at the time, his father, who was a very successful lawyer, was driving drunk and was in an accident with a motorcycle, and 2 people died.
Oh, no.
And his father was sent to prison for 7 years. And imagine, like, I'm just like, what the F happened here? Like, why? Talk about going, why? I'm like, can I not just, like, can my kid just have it a little bit easier than I did? Right? It was extremely difficult. And talk about forgiveness. It was very hard to forgive. You know, it took me some time, but I did. And I was the only person, me and one other person were the only ones that really stood by him the entire time. And I had to plan his mother's funeral when his mom died because he was in prison. And, you know, we were divorced. We were divorced for 6 years when his mom died. And I had to, I made a choice. And my son is better off today than he was. It was a tragic thing. And my son made a choice too. And, I had said to my best friend, I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this. They don't give you as having an infant, they don't give you a manual when your baby's born. You have no idea.
Manual.
And I'm like, what page do I go to? Ex-husband is, convicted of manslaughter and goes to prison. Like, what do you do? Like, what, how do I handle this? And my best friend said, Sandee, everything that you have done, all the self-help books, all the seminars, everything that you have done has prepared you for this moment, and you've got this. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Was it easy? No, it was hard. It was I was in survival mode for 7 years, survival mode, like literally, can I pay my bills this month? Can I, like, it was so hard. And you know what? I am a better person today as a result. And yeah, he signed up for that too. My ex signed up for it. My son signed up for it. And I signed up for it. We all did, because it's very interconnected. And it sucks. You know, you have an affluent family that's affected like that and loses everything, right? Like, you know, and you know, you just, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? There's so much truth to that. It's corny. That saying has been around for who knows how many years. It's so true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah. And then, you know, just trying to look at it from a different perspective, what an amazing opportunity you had to model for your son forgiveness and happiness is a choice and strength and, you know, perseverance and a whole host of other things. And you better believe your 13-year-old son saw that, you know, and he probably is, like you said, such a stronger person because of that, because he saw you model it. And I agree with your friend. Like you had to have gone through all of those seminars, all of that self-help book, so that you could get to that point, so that you could be that person for your son and for yourself.
Yeah. 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 And today, you know, my ex-husband's out of prison. We're like brother and sister. He spends Christmas with me and Mike, because I'm remarried. He spends Christmas with us. We get along great. I know his girlfriend, and, you know, it's one big happy family. And again, that's also setting an example for people. Like, just because you get divorced doesn't mean you have to be angry. Like, we were together for 25 years, married for 21 years. You know, I mean, I was 21 when I met the man, and like, of course I loved him then, and I still have love in my heart for him, and we can be friends. We can have a relationship.
I love
for
that.
our son, for our son, right?
I love that. I love that he joins for holidays and it's one big happy family. That's definitely modeling. And, you know, it just brings me back to like the way that we change the world. Like, you can't force anyone to change, but you can step into that higher position, right? Like, you can become that beacon, that light for others. And then they see that and they rise up to your level, right? Like, you can offer them a helping hand, but being that light for people and it, like, walking the walk, right? Not just talking the talk. That's how you affect change in the world.
That's right. You have to show up as your authentic self. And I don't preach anything. I don't preach, but I don't talk about anything that I don't do myself. And if I'm not doing it, I'm 1,000% be like, hey, I own it. You know, I'm not doing this. I'm trying.
Wouldn't you say, though, that we teach what we need to hear ourselves?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Why do you think I started a happiness podcast? Because that's been the theme of my life. It's like, I want to be happy, and I want to talk to other people and learn. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to leave listeners with? Anything we haven't touched on that you feel like you really are feeling pulled to get out there right now?
Yeah, I always like to say forgive for peace. My very first book that I won 2 book awards for is a novel for teenage girls. And it was a series of 5 books. It's not, the second book was finished and was never published. So I've put the 2 books together and I'm finishing it, and I'm going to have that put out there in the world. And the main theme of that book is forgive for peace. It's a novel. It's a great story. I don't know how it's going to end. I haven't finished it, but I'm excited to put it back out in the world after 24 years or 14 years, I guess it's been.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So forgive for peace.
I love that.
Quick and easy.
And I know we've mentioned your podcast a bunch, but please tell people how they can find you, where they can find the podcast, where they can find your book, all of the things.
Yeah, you can go to sandeesgarlata.com and happinesssolved.com. And my podcast is on any podcast network. Instagram is at Coach Sandee Sgarlata. Facebook is at Coach Sandee Sgarlata as well. And YouTube is Happiness Solved. So lots of places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I love talking to you. This was a great conversation. And if you're listening and there's someone in your life you think could benefit from it, please share it. Please like, comment, subscribe. Help us spread the good word. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone.